This season, Instacart has your back to school. As in, they've got your back to school lunch favorites, like snack packs and fresh fruit. And they've got your back to school supplies, like backpacks, binders, and pencils. And they've got your back when your kid casually tells you they have a huge school project due tomorrow. Let's face it, we were all that kid. So first call your parents to say I'm sorry, and then download the Instacart app to get delivery in as fast as 30 minutes all school year long. Get a $0 delivery fee for your first 3 orders while supplies last. Minimum $10 per order. Additional terms apply.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room? It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together, we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th.
We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.
And welcome back to Scarred for Life, the podcast where we open up old wounds by looking back at the films that scared us as kids. I'm Terry.
And I'm Mary Beth.
Each episode, our special guest will bring with them a movie that traumatized them as a child.
This week, our special guest is April Wolfe. She's the co-writer of the 2019 film Black Christmas and the host of the Switchblade Sisters podcast on the Maximum Fun Network. She's also a film critic, with her work appearing on Film Comment, The Criterion Collection, LA Weekly, and more. Welcome to the show, April.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
Hi.
Thanks for coming. So one of the things we like to always start off with is, how did you get into horror?
Oh, my grandparents, my grandpa specifically.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're horror heads.
That's amazing.
Yeah, my grandpa is kind of a gore hound, so they raised me and raised me right, I guess.
Yeah.
we watched horror VHSs, religiously every night. And when I say every night, I mean literally every night.
Oh wow!
We would go
God.
We'd go to the Rite Aid by our house after we ran errands for the bar, and then we would always get 2 to 3 VHSs, and sometimes we'd go through to. More often at least just one a night, and so often there were repeats, obviously, and because the Rite Aid didn't really have the biggest selection. But
I didn't even know Rite Aid had movies that you could.
Well, like back in the day in the 1980s, it was kind of a free for all because there was kind of a burgeoning blockbuster, of course, but there was also just this huge demand for home video that hadn't existed before. And so all of these places were getting into the game, even though most of them couldn't keep up with the larger stores. But that was an interesting thing where grocery stores and convenience stores and, pharmacies also carried a really large selection of VHS rentals.
I remember that about grocery stores. I remember walking in grocery stores and they would always have in the front section, there'd be like a place to rent them. That was like a big thing in our neighborhood. I lived in Alaska, so we didn't really have a whole lot of video stores, and that was like where we would get most of them.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And what was your favorite movie that you guys watched together?
I was really into Critters, I remember.
Okay,
Critters.
Cool.
And I was really into, which one was it? I'm trying to figure out which Nightmare on Elm Street it was. I think it might have been 3.
The Dream Warriors?
It must have been Dream Warriors. I'm trying to think of the imagery from that, specifically the Dream Warriors installment of that franchise really, really stuck with me. And so I don't know if it was necessarily my favorite, but it was something where I was just like, whoa, this is very much in my psyche now. Same thing with Sleepaway Camp. That was
Oh yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
Watching that when I was so young, and you know, I have an appreciation for it. Obviously, I think it's kind of a complex film dealing with, you know, trans identity. Now, seeing it through that lens, it's just I think it's clearly much more complex than my brain was able to understand, or that the movie was able to understand. So.
Right.
But yeah, those were ones that stuck with me. And then I love the kind of horror comedies that I watched. There's the Gilda Radner, Dom DeLuise, and Gene, what's his name?
Wilder?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
The Haunted Honeymoon was a favorite of mine.
I loved Haunted Honeymoon.
Yeah.
I loved that growing up.
Yeah, I loved it because I love that kind of old-timey radio show horror aesthetic that they were playing on. And I just like Dom DeLuise cross-dressing, I guess, too.
I love him.
That's so funny. We talked about The Secret of Nim last week, and I talked about how much I love Dom DeLuise's voice. Yeah. So amazing. He's so amazing.
Good. Yeah. But he actually plays a very respectful woman, you know, he takes the part very seriously in the same way that I think that, you know, like you get with that show Buckets and Louis Anderson.
Oh, Louis Anderson, yeah.
Yeah, like he actually approaches like the female character was just like, oh, well, like, yeah, it's just a woman that I'm playing. You know, it's I like it.
I forgot that he played a woman in that. It's been so long since I've watched that. I must have been like 8 or 9 when I saw it. I don't think I've seen it since I was a kid.
Oh my God. I don't know if it holds up in some respects, but there are some kind of vaudevillian routines in it that I still I can't get it off of them. I think it's a great double feature with Clue. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I bet so. I love Clue. So you have a podcast, Switchblade Sisters. What can you tell our listeners what it's about?
Yeah. I weekly, I invite a new female filmmaker on and we talk about their favorite genre film. And we dissect it from the point of view of craft and aesthetic. So a little bit less of like, oh, here's a thing that I like, and more a little bit about how it was made, comparing it to and contrasting it to how the guest makes their films and how it maybe affected how they make their films.
So cool. What a cool fucking idea.
Thanks.
Sorry. It's just, anyway, sorry. What were you going to say, Terry? I got excited.
It really was. I actually, this week listened to, your one on, Texas Chainsaw Massacre with Megan.
Oh yeah.
And Amram. And I loved that one. I love your podcast. I listen to it every week.
Oh, cool. Thanks. I think that one with Megan Amram is probably one of my favorites too. And it's kind of cool to have just this new side to these people that you didn't know existed. Maybe the fact that like Megan Amram writes for, you know, The Good Place and Parks and Rec, these like sunny, joyous things, and her favorite movie is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's like
amazing.
Yes, this is what we want to know.
I know
we contain
so
multitudes. So April, you are a film critic, read a lot about film. So what was it like moving from like film criticism to screenwriting?
Oh, I mean, it's weird because when I moved into film criticism, no one asked me the other way around. And that's because I was a failed screenwriter for a long time. But I was a screenwriter first and just kind of used that to segue into into writing about film, just because I just like dissecting things and I like celebrating the things that I love. So, because when I got hired to be a film critic, I wasn't really a critic before. I just sometimes wrote about things that I loved, and then they kind of taught me how to do it. But they brought me in as a film critic specifically because I came from the production side of things. So they were hoping that maybe I would have a different outlook on writing about movies and critiquing them, just knowing how they're made and having made some. So.
That's cool.
Yeah, so going back into screenwriting, I guess I never really left. It's just that I've been, like you guys, when you have, projects that you're working on really quietly, I'm not one of those people who does the kind of like hashtag am writing.
Right.
Okay, yeah.
Perhaps I should have been sharing it more, but I didn't really share it publicly with the things that I was working on because I was always publishing fiction. I was publishing a lot of personal essays and some poetry and things throughout. And I just never really shared it as much, I guess. But everyone has their own process, and mine is actually fairly quiet. So
it's kind of nice, though. I feel like so many people we feel like we have to push our stuff so loudly. It is kind of nice to take a step back and maybe, I don't know, be quiet. I don't know how to put it. Be quiet, not be quiet, but I guess I feel like there is so much pressure to publish and promote. So it does sound nice to kind of have that pressure off of your shoulders a little bit.
Yeah, it's nonstop. I feel bad for anyone who's a little bit younger in the industry too, who kind of feels that pressure because
it's me. I'm younger in the industry and I feel that pressure constantly.
I didn't want to say it is you, but I was just like, I'm being coy.
No, it's me. It's me. It is me. 100% is me.
No, but I think it's a valid fear that if you don't tell people what you're doing, then they won't know and you won't get jobs, you won't get the opportunities, and because you see the people who are talking about themselves the loudest often get those opportunities, and it's not always innate for people to do that, and so I empathize with it a great deal. I've had to train myself over the years though to talk about that. It's just that some things I still keep kind of private. So
yeah, I mean, I'm new to writing about horror, but I'm also I'm 39, but I still you get to the point of almost burnout where you feel like you have to constantly be talking about what you're writing and constantly publishing and constantly just, oh gosh, I got to get more hits on my site so I can get more work. It's just, it sucks.
Yeah, I don't envy that.
Yeah.
I've actually heard people who have said that they were turned down for raises or promotions at certain outlets because they didn't have the something, quote unquote, something extra, meaning the giant social media following.
Are you fucking kidding me?
No.
Oh my god.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to depress you and your listeners.
No. That's just more frustrating to me that clout is what gets you jobs, and that's always so frustrating. I have applied for things before where they have asked how many Twitter followers I had, and I was like, why the fuck does that even matter?
Yeah.
And it's almost I have to remember this a lot. The number of Twitter followers I have does not have anything to do with the quality of my work.
No.
And it's just it sucks that especially for me, coming up as a young writer in this Twitter not economy, but Twitter environment, it's just it's exhausting, and it's I need my tweets to go viral to get attention, but it's but I don't also I would like to not be perceived. I would like to not make tweets and make people look at my profile. Sometimes it's kind of nice to just be I will just go a little bit under the radar and not I don't know. It's a weird balance that I think about way too often, and I wish I didn't.
I apologize.
No, don't apologize. It's important to talk about because I feel so many writers deal with that now, and it's important to discuss, and that hey guys, maybe being less online isn't going to affect how good of a writer you are.
Well, it's almost what's that old adage that just work smarter, not harder. So it's maybe tweet smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
Right.
Something that I have to remind myself a lot.
Yeah, same.
It's true.
Last year you had the Black Christmas remake come out. How did that remake come to be?
That is a complicated question.
Oh.
Like anything today, there's IP and that exists, and an executive will get the idea to, get a hold of the IP and find a way to reboot or remake or sequelize it. This is one of those cases where I think Blumhouse looked at the calendar, and they were talking to Universal, and they were like, okay, Friday the 13th is in December, so we would love to have some kind of like counter programming, essentially. And so then Black Christmas became the kind of sought after property for that. So Blumhouse had acquired the rights to it and asked Sophia to call if she would write and direct it. And then they told her the timeline, and she said, that's insane. And so she wanted to have a writer with her to, handle a good bulk of things while she's busy directing. And so she asked me to co-write with her, and it all went off from there.
Cool. Casual, whatever.
Yeah.
It seemed like it kind of came out of nowhere, and it sounds like everything just kind of came together really quickly. Is that what happened?
Yeah, it was really, really quickly. I mean, Sophia and I didn't really even know each other that well. She had come on to Switchblade Sisters for an episode a year earlier, and then we reconnected last December. So that would be, December 2018. And because she had a movie called New Year, New You come out on Blumhouse's Into the Dark on Hulu. And then I was like, oh, that's right. I really love your work. And I was going to completely give up screenwriting at that time. I was like, okay, well, I guess this is really not going to work for me. And I've tried and I've given it my best effort. But maybe I should just focus on these things. And then I did a last ditch thing where I sent Sophia a script, and she said, oh, I really like this and I would like to make it, but Blumhouse has been doing this. And so that's how she got to know me, is very quickly through that. And so all of a sudden we had a month to write a screenplay, and then we were in New Zealand.
Oh, so, shit.
Holy shit.
Came together very quickly.
Oh my God. Well, I absolutely adore the movie, so it worked as quickly.
Thanks.
It came. I mean, I absolutely am like obsessed with the movie. So,
I mean,
like, not to be that like fangirly annoying, but like I am obsessed with it because I do a lot of work with like rape revenge movies and women directed rape revenge movies. And like, this was just like exactly what I am looking for at all times. So I was just like sitting in the theater by myself, just like yelling and getting excited because it was like 12 p.m. I was the only one in the theater. And I was just like, this is the perfect movie. So
it's a weird thing to make a movie knowing how niche it's going to be and that it's going to be released wide, because sometimes it felt like we were tricking them into making this movie, because I'm serious, because both Sophia and I, as it turns out, we found that we both write very quickly. So that means they would send us notes and we would already have 3 different drafts back to them.
Holy shit.
Oh, wow.
And so they often couldn't keep up with our output. And,
oh my God.
And it turns out if you overwhelm people, they're like, okay, fine.
It's a great process.
So yeah, that was fun. I mean, we were so like in the moment that Sophia was on the plane to New Zealand to take off for like 3 months to do Tech Scout, and we didn't even have the green light yet.
Oh wow!
She got the green light while she was on the plane waiting to take off. And,
oh shit!
Like it was just a really weird process.
Wow,
that's absolutely wild how quickly that came together, especially for a movie that was released wide and like got such a wide release. That's wild.
Yeah, I don't think Universal wanted to release it, I'll be honest. Because, you've seen it. It's a niche movie, and I think it's going to find its audience outside of the theaters and away from the marketing. It's a thing where I don't think that studio or any studio really knew how to market that movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
There was... and inherently there are a lot of men at the top who were marketing it, and none of them understood it and didn't know that we were doing something stylistically and tonally weird. And it was a hard thing to get over the threshold. So the fact that we got the box office that we did, for us, is a very big victory, because we ended up making money.
Hell yeah. Fuck yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah. And hopefully, maybe some people someday will get to use our movie as a comp once it comes out on streaming and more people get to see it and maybe like it. We'll see.
Well, and like, hopefully, I mean, I know you said that it's like, it was like a lot of men at the top, but like, hopefully maybe this is like a good example of like, hey, these kinds of movies actually do, like, can perform really well. And like, it's worth taking a chance on something that is perhaps different than what you usually release. At least that's my, like, maybe perhaps a little bit too idealistic hope, but like.
I mean, if we had done better, I think it would have done that.
Yeah.
But the thing is that the narrative around the movie was already talking about how it was doomed before it began.
So, it was so toxic, the discussion about this movie. So
even though we weren't a flop, we were painted as a flop. So
right.
I know.
It's terrible.
It's such a bummer.
God.
And it's just something where if you look at, you know, some of their other films that are kind of comparable to our budget and what we were doing, it's like we actually did quite well.
Right.
But we're not really going to get that credit. And it's weird because it's not like anyone was like pissing and moaning necessarily about Fantasy Island being remade. And, you know, I just don't understand it.
I know.
Interesting.
I wonder
Very
what's going on there.
So weird. So yeah.
You know, it's the thing. I mean, Mary Beth and I talked a little bit about this back in December. But the thing that like I thought was amazing is I also saw this in a theater at like noon, and it wasn't a packed theater, but there were a lot of young women and teenagers at the movie. And I will tell you that there was a lot of clapping, there was a lot of cheering, especially in the dance in the beginning of the film when they kind of tell off the frat with the dance. There was like so much of like understanding and so much validation coming from the audience with that. And I thought, this is the audience that needs to see it. This is why that movie exists. And it's why this movie needs to exist, because if a young teenager understands what is going on in this film and can relate to it, then there is issues. Yeah.
And, you know, hopefully people can see that later on. Again, it's just, I wish that we had done better. And I just feel like sometimes we were set up for failure.
Well, I also kind of think you were too, because I remember when this first was announced, people were like, oh, they're remaking Black Christmas. And then it was like, then more stuff could come out about it and there would be more backlash. And then it was the PG-13 backlash. It felt like every single time some news came out, it was being painted as this negative thing. And it bothered the fuck out of me, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, it was.
So I can only imagine. It
kind of felt like from all sides that we couldn't do anything right and that there was no place to position a movie like this. So if you guys were privy to the conversations that we had about the rating throughout the entire process of making this movie, you guys would just like tear out your hair. That's why when people ask me about it, I'm like, I can't really sum up how that decision was made. Like in some ways it was made from the very beginning to make it PG-13, and we pushed boundaries knowing that we would have to pull back. And then other ways we, you know, because making something PG-13 or R doesn't have to do with violence all the time. A lot of the time it's like, you know, like we were worried, for instance, when we were starting to write it as a PG-13, that we would have to make it R simply because of the content about rape, not even showing rape, but because they're talking frankly about it.
Yeah.
And that was a huge thing. Like when we started writing this, we were given a list of words that's been passed around studios for a long time. And it's a little bit outdated. I think the last current version that people have is from 2008, but there's a list of words that you can't really use as a rule generally to get a PG-13 rating. And one of them is rape.
What the fuck?
And so if you can't talk about rape and you can't say the word rape, then you can't have a movie like the movie that we made. So that's the thing. Like when I was just like, we always intended it to be R. Then I was like, well, that's why. Because you know, it wasn't always necessarily because of like gore and violence. It was because of frank adult talk. So yeah.
Well, I'm glad that I guess they decided that rape was no longer a bad word. Like,
oh my God, you guys would, if you had any idea, like the back and forth, like it's such a negotiation to get a rating. So
yeah, I've seen a couple, like, I've seen a really cool documentary about it, and also just have seen things on Twitter and from like filmmakers that are like, it's so arbitrary.
Yeah.
Like, it's dumb. Like, you never really know exactly like what's going to get you.
I know.
Pinged. But I mean, I don't know. I feel like you guys negotiated that PG-13 rating like really well. And I think I've read interviews with you about this. Like, it's important that people like can see this that are under the age of 18.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's amazing that like young girls can go to the movies with their friends, like at the mall. Like, this is the kind of movie I would have gone and seen as a kid at the mall with my friends, and I would have loved it. Like, that's exactly. And that's the kind of movie that they should be watching. Like, if you're going to watch a horror movie, like, why not watch something like this that really understands young women, the way they talk, the way they interact, and, like, perhaps give them, like, a tool to understand, like, what could, like, they're, like, how to put words to, like, the interactions they have with men on a daily basis.
Yeah, but you guys, no studio anywhere has figured out how to reach and target young women. None of them.
Like, what?
They have no idea. Like, it's just like not on their radar. So they don't, like, one of the things, like, if you guys heard like the marketing stuff that they threw at us, it would just be like, why? Just like not understanding a younger audience, or like where they hang out, what they're interested in. It's just like a total kind of blindness that these men have for what a girl or what a young woman might be into, or where they would go.
Huh.
It's frustrating.
They know how to market to young men.
Yeah, I mean, like they spend years of their lives figuring out how to market to young men.
That's just.
I mean, that's the thing, is like that's it's the truth.
Yeah, no, exactly, and that's like so frustrating because, like, I don't know. I feel like there's so many movies out there that are like technically targeted to young women, but they don't know how to market that. Like, I don't know. That is so utterly confusing and a blind spot and gross. Like.
Or just women in general. I mean, look at Birds of Prey. Yeah. When I talk to Kathy Ann, I'm just like, I'm looking at her marketing and I'm like, okay, I actually like the posters. I like a lot of that stuff. I think that some of the things they were doing were awesome, but also, like, you know, women aren't a monolith. And so how do you reach a certain kind of woman and tell them to go and see this movie? You don't know, like, especially if they're not into comic books usually. And that's the thing that, you know, with Black Christmas, it's like, okay, so I designed it for something of like, well, maybe a woman who's not usually into horror, and maybe she'll find something here for them, you know. So it's just hard.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, regardless, I'm glad the movie got made and that it did relatively well, and hopefully it'll keep getting more, especially when it comes out on streaming and Blu-ray. Hopefully, fingers crossed, I want a Blu-ray. Like, it'll keep getting more attention, because, I mean, I know you guys have gotten a lot of haters, but, like, what about supporters? Like, what has it been like hearing from those who love the movie? Like, from young women, or from people who maybe had a similar experience to Riley? Like, what has that been like to hear from people who loved it?
I mean, that part is surreal, I think. For me, I did go through an assault when I was in college, and you know, you put a little bit of yourself on the screen, but at the same time, it's still kind of like a movie version, right? There's like kind of cheese and dramatic things to it, obviously. But so when you have these young women who are like just DMing you with their very, very long stories about what happened to them and how it taps into it, you're like, oh, okay, thank God, at least we made the movie for someone, you know? Like,
yeah. And I actually had my own experience with an assault in college with a romantic partner, and watching this movie was just like a catharsis, like the biggest catharsis, because he was a frat bro, and like very similar conversations were had, like, in my experience, and it was just like the most cathartic thing to see it on screen like that, and like it meant a lot.
Well, that is really good to hear. Thank you for saying that.
Of course.
And I really hope that people feel like brave enough to continue doing it. Brave is the wrong word, because it's all just like a capitalist whatever bullshit thing. It's like, whoever tells you you can do it, but I mean, you know.
Well, and thank you for putting a little bit of yourself into the movie. I know it's hard to kind of confront that in writing, but it's awesome.
Oh my God.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah. Anyway, wow. Okay, so do we want to talk about what we've been watching, Terry?
Yeah.
Okay, Terry, what have you been watching?
So I'm still going through movies that I caught at Panic Fest. Mm-hmm. And the one that I wanted to talk about today, I'm stalling as I pull it up, is a movie called Two Heads Creek. It's an Australian film.
Okay.
About, and it takes place, well, it starts off in a post-Brexit Britain.
Oh, interesting.
Where a Polish pair of twins are dealing with the death of their mother who died from old age, and they're like being told to like get out of Britain, and there's a lot of anti-immigration stuff going on, and they discover that their mom wasn't really their mom, and their birth mother is from Australia, from this small town called Two Heads Creek. And so they decide to go to this town to figure out who their real mother was. It is about immigration. Even when they go to Australia, there's they get on this bus to go to this town, and the bus is full of a lot of Asian people that are coming in to work. A lot of Asian immigrants. They're the only white people on the bus, and there's they're sitting in there, and they're trying to figure out what is going on. And the whole movie is basically a big FU to the white patriarchy in Australia. Mm-hmm. And it's really funny. It's really funny. And it has that kind of gonzo gore to it that kind of reminded me of early Peter Jackson, or
cool.
Kind of like Evil Dead 2, kind of like the splatter. I kind of call it splatstick humor, because it's very much
It's very good.
Because it's the gore is used to make you chuckle and whatnot, but it was really good, and it had just enough of a political edge to make it interesting past the comedy. It was definitely just surface level type humor when it came to the politics, but it definitely was there, and it added a lot. And I really hope it gets distribution. I'm not sure if it has distribution yet, but it was the first movie we saw at Panic Fest, and it was probably one of my favorite experiences in the theater of the movies that I hadn't already seen.
Cool. That's awesome. I hadn't heard of it. And Australian horror is quickly becoming one of my favorite nationalities of horror, because I feel like they make some wild things.
There's been a lot of good stuff coming out of there recently.
Really good, Hounds of Love, The Loved Ones,
The Furies.
The Furies. There's just some really amazing Australian horror films out there.
Yeah, and then the other movie is not horror, but it's something that I really, 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 really enjoyed, and it's called And Then We Danced.
Oh, I've heard such good things about that movie. I really want to see it.
Yeah, it is a coming of age and a coming out story of a dancer in the city of Tbilisi. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm not really sure, but it's in this place. Dance is a national identity for them, mm-hmm. and it's very what we would consider stereotypically masculine. And he's a very free form dancer. And so there's a lot of talk about toxic masculinity in it. Mm. And he falls in love with a dancer that's there that's also kind of sort of coming out of the closet. And it's there's the romance, and it's there, but it's more about this young man trying to determine what his place is in society, and what his role is going to be in the future, and if he wants to be part of this culture of very conservative, very toxic dance company. And I thought it was so good. The main character, the main actor, his name is Levin Gilbakiani, and this is his first role. He's a dancer in real life. He just has such a naturalistic performance to this that just really pulled me in. And he kind of gives Timothée Chalamet a run for that kind of floppy-headed,
oh my god,
floppy-haired adorableness. But it's really, really good. I think it's out in theaters, limited right now.
Okay.
So I'm hoping it'll be out streaming and whatnot eventually. But definitely, I would keep it on your radar if you're a fan of these kind of coming of age tales.
Amazing.
I heard that movie getting kind of unfairly compared to other queer movies and kind of getting lambasted because, you know, someone was comparing it, I think, to like BMP, which is just, or BPM, sorry. And BPM is like a very different kind of film. And I don't know. I don't know why it was being compared, but I would love to check out that movie.
I also know that like this became a cultural moment in Georgia because like they actually what started it is the director and writer Levin Akin. He in 2013 witnessed this like pride rally that became like a hate crime where thousands of like Orthodox religious people, the Georgian Orthodox Church, were like riling up a crowd of thousands of people, and they descended on this 100-person like protest against homophobia, and like people got hurt really bad. People went to jail. Like it was this horrible thing. When they screened this movie for the first time, they ended up having to walk through what they called shame chambers, where people were basically on all sides of them, yelling at them as they were trying to go screen this film. So
Good
like
Lord.
It became this big moment over in Georgia. And it's just, I don't know. It really hit me hard when I saw this. And like, again, I don't think it's necessarily a romance. There is a romance to it, but it is more about the character coming of age. And I can kind of see what people were talking, like compare it. I think it's unfavorable to compare it to like BPM and that kind of stuff, because it's more a very personal story of this one man in Georgia. But like, yeah, it's just a shame that like niche films get put against each other. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Like,
this one's got gays. This one's got women. Cool.
Yep,
same thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
same exact movie as this other one, right? It's like when Call Me by Your Name came out and God's Own Country, everyone was trying to compare the two, and I'm like, can't they both be good for different reasons? Like,
yeah,
there can only be one gay movie, Terry.
I know,
only one gay movie.
Well, that's the thing,
so
that
true.
kind of reinforces the way that studios think about things too, that there can only be one gay. And so when audiences do that and critics do that, I'm just like, oh no.
don't contribute. Don't contribute. But those are the two that I saw. What about you, Mary Beth?
So I watched Mulholland Drive today for the first time, and that was a wild experience. And I loved it. I don't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't that in a good way. In a way that only David Lynch can provide me. My sweet, sweet father. I love him so much. But I don't know. I hadn't seen it. And then I thought today, while lying on the couch sick, was a good time to watch it. And I was like, I totally get it. And I don't think I did. I was just like, yeah, definitely. Like, my fever-addled brain totally understands every narrative beat of this movie. And then when it ended, I was like, I don't think I know what happened. But I loved every minute of it, because only David Lynch can make me invested in a film that has like 6 different storylines in it, and somehow they all come together, but not really. So that was awesome. And also, April, I saw you tweeted about this. I'm watching Avenue 5 too. And Avenue 5 is a comedy on HBO. It's like a comedy. It's a comedy in space that I think is absolutely hilarious. It's like very dry humor. And we watch it. My roommate, my boyfriend, and I watch it whenever it comes on, and it's so fucking funny. It's like, it's a spaceship it's like a cruise ship in space, and they get knocked out of their orbit, and they end up like they're trapped on the ship all together, and it's about like the politics of the spaceship, and also everyone's a total moron and doesn't know what they're doing. And it is so funny. I think, April, you compared it to The Terror.
Yeah.
And
oh, wow.
It's like not actually, because it's a comedy, but like what a hilarious comparison. Because like Hugh Laurie is in it as one of the main characters. Josh Gad is in it. Who else? Like a bunch of people from The Office are in it. So it's like, it's just so funny, and it's so like uncomfortable, I guess is a good way to put it. But I'm really enjoying it. So yeah, it's and it's 30-minute episodes too. So it's like one of those like low commitment shows, but I'm having a great time with it. April, what have you been watching?
Okay, I have been watching the things that are leaving the Criterion channel.
Oh yeah.
because that's like the easiest way to get me interested is like a cat, then you drag like the toy behind the couch. It's just like, no, don't leave. And then I get interested. So I've been watching a lot of Lena Wertmuller. Because I was under educated on her, even though I knew that she had actually broken so many barriers as a woman filmmaker. So I watched some of her films, and Seven Beauties is amazing. I watched one called Summer Night that I don't want to talk about because I really want to remake it. But I'm really in love with it. And she has pretty much, you turn on any movie that she had from Criterion or rent it or find it however you can. And it is just so phenomenal. She is making movies that are very structurally interesting in the same way that Robert Altman was doing at the time.
Cool.
Certain movies she has are very kind of textured and layered with sound, and they rove, and they've got many different characters who have their own kind of internal lives going on, and it's very much of its time, of that like mid 70s to early 80s time period when she was kind of having her largest output, and but they're so darkly funny. Everything is so funny, and she has such a wicked sense of classism and humor that it's so wonderful. I can't believe it's taken me this long to become a super fan of hers. So I've definitely been watching that. And then also Dusan Makaveyev's Montenegro. I finally bought, and I love it so much. He is R.I.P. He died last year. He was such a sickly, funny man from the Czech Republic or Yugoslavia. I can't remember which one. But he was making movies that just, you have no idea what's going to happen next, but they're so funny and so dark. And I cannot recommend Montenegro enough because it's about, it stars Susan Anspaugh, an American actress, blonde woman, who is living in Sweden with her husband, who is Swedish. And she starts kind of losing her mind and becomes a little bit bored. Her husband's cheating on her and her kids are kind of assholes. And in a weird kind of slapstick thing, she ends up going to the airport and accidentally going home with this band of like gypsies and and living at a strip club called Zanzibar. And it is so weird. But I highly recommend searching out any of those movies.
That sounds amazing and weird and exactly what I'm looking for. I'm looking at it on Letterboxd right now, and I want to watch all of his movies now.
They're so weird. Everything is so weird. I
love that.
I just want to be surprised. I don't want to see the same thing over and over again. And yeah. And these people were figuring out structure in a very different way a long time ago. So
that's so cool.
That's awesome.
Well, so now that we've talked about what we've been watching, do we want to talk about the movie you've brought this week, April? What are we talking about?
Oh my God, we're talking about Cujo.
Nothing that lives in the imagination is more frightening than the terror that lives in Castle Rock, Maine.
Cujo?
Cujo?
Can he get us in here? Can he eat his way in here?
From the novel by Stephen King comes a startling vision of fear. Now there's a new name for terror. Cujo.
Cujo! So, Cujo In this tale of a killer canine, man's best friend turns into his worst enemy. When sweet St. Bernard Cujo is bitten by a bat, he starts behaving oddly and becomes very aggressive, aka he has rabies. Meanwhile, domestic bliss is at stake when stay-at-home mom Dana, played by Dee Wallace, finds love in another man. In the midst of marital drama, Donna gets caught in Cujo's crosshairs on a fateful errand with her son Tad. Stuck in their tiny car, Donna and Tad have a frightening showdown with the crazed canine.
So, how old were you when you saw this, April?
Oh my God, either 3 or 4. I was very
Oh my God.
Holy shit!
Oh no!
Yeah, it was. I mean, we watched everything when I was too young, but this one stuck out to me in terms of being afraid for the rest of my entire life and not feeling like I could ever watch it again. And I did watch it again for this podcast. So.
Wow. So 3 or 4, gosh, what scenes kind of stuck out to you at that early age that lingered in your head?
Oh,
because that's insane.
There was one where Danny Pintora playing, I can't remember what the child's name is, the character.
Tad. Yeah, the little kid.
At some point in time, he starts kind of hyperventilating.
Oh my God.
And he can't breathe. And when I was a kid, it felt so realistic. And Dee Wallace, the mother, is just like being like, you have to breathe. You cannot do this to me. You have to breathe. And as a kid, I was like, wow, this is really scary. I can't handle this. And then as an adult, I was like, wow, this is really scary. I can't handle this.
Yes.
I was correct as a child that this is still a scary movie.
Yes. I was watching a behind the scenes documentary on this, and I saw that the actor that played Tad, Danny Pintora, he actually suffered from seizures at his early age. So when they were like, hey, do you know what a seizure is? He's like, I think I can do it. And that scene, he was 6 when he did this, and he couldn't read, but he is probably one of the best child actors I have seen in a horror film. His role was terrifying.
Yes, absolutely. And when I told my husband, I was just like, you realize that's Danny Pintora from Who's the Boss? That's Jonathan. He was just like, no. And I'm like, that's Jonathan.
Oh shit, really?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
Because that's why I started watching Who's the Boss, was because my grandparents were like, oh, it's the kid from Cujo. And I was like, oh. So, I mean, I feel like that guy should have had a much longer career, honestly. He's very good. Maybe he didn't want to be acting as much. I don't know what happened with him later on in life, but
I think the charisma between him and Dee Wallace, their performances together, it's really terrifying to watch as an adult. I thought this movie was really scary.
Oh, yeah.
It's horrifying. I had never seen this movie until this week, and oh my God, it's awful. Especially with his Danny Pintora's performance, his screaming and crying. I'm like, this is I do not have children, but I'm like, if I was a mom watching this, I'd be like, turn this fucking movie off right now. It's heartbreaking. It's terrifying.
And I think that it was a simple story told very well. And I think that's its strong suit, is it's really relying on these performances from these actors in this, because a lot of it is kind of locked room within that car for a long time, right, or in that yard. And what they were able to do with that is really, really just kind of visually intelligent. And I really appreciated it. But this is truly a scary. And also, as an adult, I felt bad for Cujo then.
Right?
Because I as a child, I was just like, oh, evil, bad dog. But then as an adult, I'm like, oh, this poor dog was just not taken care of. And it's just reacting, and it can't help but kill because it's rabid. And yeah, so scary.
And I work at an animal shelter, as my day job. And I was like, this is the perfect movie to tell you to vaccinate your pets. Mm-hmm. But also, it's so funny too, because we get dogs into where I work that are named Cujo. And now that I've seen the movie, I'm like, guys, why would you name your dog Cujo? It's such a terrible name. And it just makes me it made me laugh before, but now it makes me kind of cringe a little bit. It's like, oh no, Those poor dogs. And it's so funny. Well, to me, like the Saint Bernard, I think I saw this on Letterboxd too. Like Saint Bernards are such sweet dogs, and the fact that they made like such a big sweet dog known for saving people in the snow, so scary and goopy and bloody and gross, amazing, phenomenal. Like he's so goopy.
He's just disgusting. Just like
disgusting,
slathered with like sun-baked mayonnaise and ketchup and mustard. You know. Oh.
Yeah, I saw in like the in the behind the scenes documentary that I was watching that it was like whipped egg whites, and they had they had to like keep applying it to him because and like quickly get a shot in because he would start licking it off of his face before he could do anything. And to kind of piggyback off what you said about them being such sweet dogs, they actually tied their tails down because they were wagging the entire time they were doing this.
Babies.
They're just like they're having such a good time.
They were.
I'm just here to have fun.
And they didn't. The animal trainer didn't want to use Saint Bernards. He's like, they're not trained. You can't train Saint Bernards to do this kind of stuff. And they're like, can we use like a Doberman Pinscher? I got trained Doberman Pinschers, but like, no, it has to be a Saint Bernard. And that dog is freaking huge.
They're absolutely ginormous animals, and like they drool so much, and they're just damp creatures. Mm-hmm. And was it a Saint Bernard in the book too? I haven't read the book, so I'm not as familiar.
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Have you read it, April?
No, I never read that one. I'm fairly slim on the books that I've read of King. I think I read, I read The Dead Zone and It growing up, but I can't remember which other ones I actually took.
So when I messaged you and we were talking, April, and you suggested this movie, and I was like, I don't know if I've ever seen this movie. It turns out I have. I don't know if I've like blocked it from my mind because I have a severe fear of dogs. I always have.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
I've been bitten twice by him
very
viciously.
Ugh.
One when it was going through my throat and my arm was in the way, and I have scars.
Terry.
I have scars on my arm where it bit me. And when I was younger, a Doberman Pinscher jumped on my back when I was in a friend's yard and bit me. Like I'm very traumatized with dogs, and I've gotten better as I've gotten older, but I don't know if I like blocked this movie out, but I remembered scenes of it. And it was when I was watching it this time that I realized that I had seen it because when I was growing up, I read a lot of Stephen King books, and I read most of them before I saw the movie. This is one of the rare exceptions. And I had this vivid memory when I was watching this because in the book, sorry guys, spoilers for a 40-year-old book, but the kid dies.
No shit.
Yes. Tad dies in the book.
Whoa.
And the book is very nihilistic. And I remember, because I had seen the movie first where the kid lives, and I got to that part in the book and I threw the book across the room, and I was so pissed, and I didn't read it again for like 3 or 4 weeks because I was so betrayed that they would, after all of this, the kid would die. And he didn't die from the dog. He died from dehydration. He died from this, being in the car and kind of sun heat stroke and all that. And I remember feeling so betrayed by that novel.
Oh,
holy shit.
I mean, it's brutal already in the movie. I can't imagine. Like, if the son died, I would be just absolutely heartbroken.
And that's exactly how it hit me when I was a kid, because like, I mean, the movie is terrifying, and a lot of the stuff that happens in the movie happened in the book. But like, one of the things that I think they kind of stripped out from the movie is they made it more lean by just focusing mostly on Donna and Vic and Tad, whereas the book kind of sets up almost this like domino effect of all these little things that went wrong. And it's almost like deterministic and like fate that this was going to happen.
Oh,
like,
interesting.
So much kind of was set up where it's like, if they hadn't won the lottery, or if they hadn't done this, or if, the cereal hadn't had made people sick, or if this didn't happen, or if that didn't happen, all of these events kind of came together to make such a depressing ending.
Wow.
And that's something that I don't think the movie necessarily taps into, but I think it's probably for the best.
I mean, it's already fatalistic in a manner of just like, and then this happens, and then this happens, and everything's leading to this. And I like that the movie cuts out on a freeze frame where you actually don't know if those two survive, because they're both pretty battered. You're not sure if they're actually going to live.
She's got to get those rabies shots.
Yeah, she does.
Well, and something I was talking to Terry about before we were recording, but I wanted to talk about more, was I liked this movie a lot, but something that really gave me pause was the way, like, the gender representation in this film. Because at first I was thinking, okay, Cujo is killing bad men. Hell yeah, Cujo. Because he gets what are they? Comer? Is that their last name? Comer.
Camper.
So there's the poorer family that repair the cars, and the patriarch of the family and his friend are both mauled by Cujo. And I was thinking, okay, this is going to be very interesting in terms of like the bad men are going to get attacked. But then all of a sudden it's Donna trapped in a car being attacked. And I kind of had this reading that she's getting almost attacked for disturbing the order of things. Like, she cheated on her husband and she kind of ruined the domestic ideal, and she is getting punished. And maybe that's me reading too much into it, but I had a lot of feelings about that as I was watching, and I was just curious if either of you had like a reading like that or had any thoughts about that.
I felt like watching it now, I can see what you're talking about, but at the same time, I think that the movie actually did a decent job of portraying the husband as like being pretty distant and focused on his job and not available to her. And so to me, it felt like it was giving her enough leeway to be a person who made mistakes and not be evil. So I think that kind of saved it for me. And also it made her just the nature of her reacting during that attack is just, it made her vulnerable and sympathetic in a way that was much more complex to me.
Yeah.
Because it was also partly like the husband left on this business trip and isn't taking the time to repair his marriage. And this is why his family is stuck in this fucking predicament. He like makes her go and get the car fixed while he's going out and fixing a dumb cereal ad campaign, which is also hilarious. Nothing wrong here.
Right.
I know, over and over again. Nothing wrong here. Nothing wrong here.
Parts of the book was and I don't think they really touched on it too much in the movie, but like what it was doing, it was making people's insides red, and so it looked like they were like shitting out their stomachs.
Oh Jesus!
When the kids would go use the restroom, and so like that's kind of how the whole thing like started, because like one of the first things that you would get introduced in the book is this girl in Iowa that's like shitting red, and all of a sudden it's because of the cereal and the doctor. Nothing wrong here, you know.
Wow. Well, and April, I see that actually that makes a lot of sense, because I also feel like this is like a rare example of a movie like from the 80s that lets a woman be messy and like a mother be messy a little bit. Like she's not portrayed really as necessarily the bad guy, and she is the narrative, like a narrative focus. She's not like a side character to the husband, but more it is a movie about her, and she's allowed to like make a mistake and have this affair, but then also like feel remorseful, and then also be like a badass woman, and also really confused and scared. And it is an example of like a female character that's allowed to be not one thing or the other, which I did appreciate. And Dee Wallace kills it. Like, she's amazing in this movie.
You guys, and also Dee Wallace was married to the actor who plays her husband, Christopher Stone. That. Yeah, Christopher Stone and her were in multiple movies together. And in fact, they were happily married for a long time until he suddenly died from a heart attack in like...
Oh, no.
God, I can't remember if it was 85 or 95. I think it was 85.
Wow.
Damn.
And so, yeah, they were acting together quite a bit. And I thought their scenes together were quite lovely. But, yeah, so they were actually married. And I think that every performance in this film is absolutely wonderful. But Dee Wallace just never gets enough credit. Never.
She doesn't.
She doesn't. Like, this movie, like, I mean, the sheer physicality of just, like, her screaming and I mean, I feel like especially in a car, like she has not a lot of space to move, but the way she's able to have that really intense physicality is so impressive.
Yeah.
And oh man.
One of my favorite parts of the movie actually is when Tad is like, I want my daddy, get me my daddy. And she's spent the last however many days in this movie saving this kid, and he's calling for his daddy, and she's like, I'll get you your daddy. Like, it's like this like frustrated anger of like, really? I'm trying to save you, and you're calling for your dad.
I want my daddy.
Okay.
I want my daddy.
Oh my God.
I want my daddy. I want my daddy. I want my daddy. I want my daddy.
All right, I'll get your daddy.
And there's like so much like rage behind that I thought felt very, very realistic for that kind of situation, and she just nails that part.
Yeah, I also clocked that moment and was just like, oh shit, like this is very, I'll get you your fucking daddy.
Right.
Oh.
So another scene that I wanted to talk about that's like it's not even like with the dog. It's this scene where Tad is like turning off the light in his room and running towards his bed.
Yes.
Like that whole sequence was shot so like interestingly and beautifully, and also was so relatable to like how I used to do it as a kid, like kind of prepping to turn off the light and sprint to bed.
Yes.
Like, what an amazing shot that had literally nothing to do with the dog, but sets up this tension and this fear, like childhood fear, so well. And then the closet door, it's like they took an image out of every child's nightmare and just put it perfectly on screen, and absolutely amazing. Like at the very beginning, it sets such an intense tone for the rest of the movie.
Yeah, I think I fell in love with this movie despite the fact that it made me feel so terrible and so tense. But I'm not scared by movies generally. It's one of the reasons why I can watch so many horror movies and just kind of feel like, oh wow, that was interesting, or I really like that shot. But this one had me from beginning to end. It was, this is a perfect film.
And this is the first time you've rewatched it since you were a kid, right?
Yeah, I could not revisit it whatsoever. There's no way.
So one of my favorite moments of this movie, and it startled the shit out of me, was the way it used a kind of a fake out killer POV when the dog when the first dog attack happens on the car, because like the camera is like low and the door's open and she's like trying to get Tad out of his buckle and it's not working, and the camera sort of like creeps up on the car, and you're trained to think that that's the dog because of the way that like it's set, and it's that kind of killer POV thing. And then all of a sudden it's not him because he's jumping up on the window on the other side, and I seriously jumped out of my chair at that part. It like really got me.
Yes. Oh God, absolutely. There's the way that he messed with the expectations in that film were good. I realized I misspoke earlier. I think I said that Christopher Stone played the husband, but he played the lover. So that's what I was saying.
Oh,
okay.
Those scenes together, I thought they were really beautiful. I thought it was so them playing off together.
You could kind of see that between the two of them, that there was like a relationship there.
Yeah, they were going for it, you know?
Yeah.
Well, but then there was also that really awful moment in the kitchen where he's like, just like trying to yank her panties off. And she's like, please don't, my kid is upstairs.
Yeah.
And he's just like, just kidding, we're going to do it anyway. And it's just like this poor woman just like cannot catch a break from any of the men in her life. Like she is just getting shit on from all sides. It's just like,
I love the complexity of this movie. And like I said, it's such a simple story. It's not that much there,
right.
You know?
But it is so complex. Like, the more I think about it, the more it's like, you know, you hear about Cujo and everyone knows the name Cujo. It's like, oh yeah, it's a killer dog. But you see the movie and you're like, this is more than just a killer dog. Like, there's so much more happening and there's so much more story to it. Like, it is a simple story, but there's so much more humanity to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And the actual like Cujo part doesn't even start until about like 40 minutes into the movie or so. You know, it's like 40 or 50 minutes in when Cujo, like, when they're stuck out there. There's so much setup going in it. And the thing that like I really picked up on this time that I really enjoyed was this kind of like mix of real fear versus imaginary fear, because, you know, Donna is afraid of growing old and useless and bored in this town. Vic is feared of, like, has these financial fears, and Tad has all these fears of the thing in the closet. And I think he's picking up on some of, like, the fears that his parents have. But ultimately, it's like this real fear that kind of puts everything into perspective. Because, like, it's not until the dog gets introduced that, like, it's like, oh shit, no, this is the thing to really be afraid about, you know?
Yeah. Oh man, I love thinking about this movie.
Remake it. I'm just kidding.
God, it's like such a perfect movie. Oh my God.
I know. And I feel like this movie does not get the credit it deserves, I don't think. It's like, I feel like it's almost like a punchline sometimes, like Cujo, but it really should get more credit for being a really good horror movie and a really good, like, tight story that talks about, like, humanity and also a pretty intense monster in scare quotes. Because, like, it's nothing supernatural either. It's rabies. Like, if you think about it, really, like, I don't think I'm not, like, an expert in rabies, so I don't know if this could actually happen, but, like, it's not necessarily like a far-fetched or supernatural plot. Like, it's just a really fucked up dog, which is even scarier.
We had talked a little bit, Mary Beth and I, before we started recording, that, like, so Stephen King has no recollection of writing this story.
Was it in his alcoholism phase, or?
Yeah, he was downing, I think he said in an interview that he was downing a 16 pack a day of beer.
Oh my God.
And, like, in a lot of Stephen King's work, you can kind of see, I feel like he kind of almost casts himself as, like, the villain in a lot of the stories. Because, like, I see this dog, and the way he talks about the dog in the book, he writes a couple things from the dog's perspective, and it's almost as if, like, the dog is seeing through, like, a haze of, like, alcoholism or whatever the case may be. It's like, it's almost portrayed that way. And the footnote on the book reminds people that Cujo was wanted to be a good dog and bad things happen.
Yeah.
And it kind of, like, it kind of reminds me of, like, maybe how he was seeing himself in some ways, of, like, you know, he's trying to do the best he can, but bad things happen. And I almost feel like it's another one of those stories. It's kind of about his alcoholism, even when he might not consciously know it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he consciously didn't know he wrote it, so that makes sense.
Like, what the heck? Like, that's gotta be wild to write so many books and be like, I don't fucking remember writing this, but I guess, like, people really liked it. Jesus, that's ridiculous. That's awful.
Well, and then it's also, like, probably his darkest work, to be perfectly honest.
Oh, for sure.
I feel like we didn't even bring up the fact that there's, like, a whole other separate family drama with the family that owns Cujo.
Yes, like the poor I guess there's, like, there's obviously the wealth dynamics here with, like, the wealthy family who moved there from New York City to, like, the poor family who's probably lived there for a while, and that, like, entire relationship dynamic. And I know that in the book, from reading about it, that they talk more about that family, right, Terry? There's more of, like, a even split between the two of them.
Yes, okay. Because in fact, so Joe Camber, the patriarch, is abusive. And his wife, Charity, wants to take their son, Brett, away from the family because she starts seeing that the kid is acting in the same way as the dad. And she's terrified of it becoming, like, the cycle of, you know, abuse, pretty much. And so when she wins the lottery, she basically tricks her husband into letting her go be with her sister, and she has no plans of coming back.
Oh, yeah, because she puts, I mean, and even in the movie, you can tell it because she puts a photo album in her back.
Right. And they just sort of, like, hint at it in that, because, like, I remember, especially in the movie, the thing that kind of brought me back to the book was when Brett is like, we should tell Dad about Cujo. And she's like, no, because she doesn't want any reason to have them be forced to stay. Yeah. She wants to get out.
Yeah.
That whole family dynamic thing is just, I think it's such an interesting foil between the two, because you have, like, you have in both cases, the wife, for different reasons, wanting to kind of be a part of the away from the family, you know. Yeah. With Donna, it's the affair kind of thing, and with Charity, it's the abuse and not wanting to see her son.
Yeah, I again, that texture, I think, adds a lot to the story that could have just been the dog is evil.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to bring up was the fact that the first guy who's killed by Cujo is played by the actor Mills Watson. And Mills Watson is also in my favorite episode of Murder, She Wrote, one of my favorites.
Oh. Amazing.
He's a perennial, wonderful character actor who...
Yeah, I was going to say he looks like a character actor. I wasn't sure what he'd been in before, but...
My favorite is him just like squatting on the porch screaming,
Come on! Come on! I don't give a shit! Hear me? I don't give a shit!
I don't give a shit! I don't give a shit! I was like, oh, okay. Like, I was just like, what? But also amazing. Like, just a very intensely strange moment between him and the dog.
Yep. There's like a kind of like surrender of control in that moment where you're just like, well, fuck you too, dog.
Well, especially because like there's that one scene where the two of them the two guys are talking about how they're going to take the lottery money and go on like a titty trip to Boston and like take the money and just like get hookers and drink a lot and like typical gross dude stuff. And he says something about Cujo like never doing anything, like never hurting a fly, like Cujo won't do anything. And then like not much later the dog is like ripping his throat out.
Nothing wrong here.
Everything's fine.
Oh man.
But yeah, wow, I'm like so glad that I got to watch this movie finally, because it really is so complex and great, like as compared to what it like the cultural zeitgeist and conversation around it hints at.
Yeah.
Terry,
Anyway,
do we have any last things you want to talk about?
I'm good. Did you have anything else, April?
No, I feel like we covered a lot of things.
We did.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Wow. So thank you so much, April, for joining us to talk about Cujo. Where can our listeners find you? And do you have anything coming up you'd like to share?
I am on Twitter too much, so they can always find me on Twitter. And I do have some things coming up, but I can't share anything yet. It's the epidemic of this business that you can't share news until it's either official or it's announced for someone else by someone else. So yeah.
And what's your Twitter handle in case people don't know?
It's a wolfful, like you have a handful of something, but instead it's a wolfful, but it's complicated. I don't know. I wasn't intending to spend a lot of time on Twitter when I created the account, if you can tell.
And we'll make sure and we'll link your handle in the show notes too.
Okay.
And the day after this comes out, I believe Black Christmas will be out digitally. It comes out the 3rd, I think, right, of March?
Yeah. You can rent the Blu-ray or the digital copy, I think, sometime in March. Yeah.
Do it. So you've heard from us, but we want to hear from you guys. What was your experience with Cujo? Send us an email at scarredforlifepodcast@gmail.com, and we might feature you in an upcoming episode. You can also reach out to us on Twitter. I'm at MB McAndrews.
And I'm at Gaily Dreadful.
And of course, follow and tag us on Twitter at Scarred Podcast.
And please don't forget to review, rate, and subscribe.
Thank you to Steve Barnold for our artwork, and thank you to Sean Keller for our amazing intro music. Thank you to everyone for listening, and stay creepy.
And until next time.
Somebody please think of the
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room?
It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together, we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th. We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.